2-3 exhibition. And I guess what I like to is the artist, Friedman, who's come a long way to us. This evening from Melbourne, but in a more historical biographical sense, from New England, the United States, via California, via Sweden, via Norway, Denmark, various other places. I'll come back to that in a moment. I want to first welcome Ken to Townsville. Well done. I also want to extend thanks tonight to Richard Gillespie, who's standing in black over there, well framed in the middle, symmetrically in the middle of the doorway. He's an artist at all times. He's also the director of the Emerge Gallery, which we're standing in the midst of, who has worked wonderfully, as he always does, on the logistics and the presentation of tonight's exhibition. And in fact, as you can see from the presentation of tonight's exhibition, you can see the work of the hand of the artist in the exhibition presentation. I also want to thank another member of my staff, Sarah Welsh, who has organised Ken's visit and has publicised it. And thanks also to the members of the audience here tonight. I hope everybody has a really good time observing and looking at Ken's artworks. To actually provide just a little few comments, a few minutes context for Ken's work, and when I finish doing that, I'll hand the microphone to Ken in the event that he should wish to make a few comments tonight for the audience here tonight. Ken Friedman comes to us with track record. His life has been what all lives should be. It's been one filled with adventure, wonder, and some gorgeous twists and turns. He's an artist who is well versed in the sciences, an educator who is a skilled administrator, an exhibitor of collective artworks who has been a professor of strategic leadership, a design research professor, a dean of faculty who during his tenure organised multiple international events in design thinking, and who is a global leader in graduate education in art and design. So that's the official CV. Now I'm going to tell you the truth about this guy. The younger Ken, who I suspect is still very much with us, joined a multinational art movement climate called Fluxus in 1966. The 50s, 60s ongoing efflorescence subtly changed our lives, even if we didn't know about it at the time. Actually, the most interesting changes are always the ones we don't know about, that draw us in without beating us over the head with their self-declared virtues. Fluxus was an entity of indirection, which sat very well with the Zen thread of Buddhism that influenced some of its key tenets. And if you look at the artworks on display tonight, you will find actually several explicit references to Zen. Ken is a self-described member of the third wave of Fluxus. Quite a number of its earlier members sat in on classes with John Cage at the New School for Social Research in New York in the 1950s. Now, Cage was a composer, but principally a philosopher of art, really actually a philosopher of a Zen-like inverted art. And let me explain that. John Cage wanted to get rid of capital A art. Not though I think because he was yet another annoying member of the capital A arts avant-garde, or even because he was a precursor of 1960s conceptual art, but rather Cage had an intuition in the days of capital A art that had passed down from Greek antiquity through the medieval church to the modernists was ended. And those days did end. And this, by the way, was a great loss. I lived through that ending. I saw it for myself. I saw a sterile drain of energy from the capital A arts through the 1970s to today. The last 40 years have produced a few great artworks in the classic sense, but it did, though, produce something else. So that loss is not really without gain. John Cage, in truth, was not a great composer, but he had an interesting attitude. He recognised that capital A art was having great difficulty with its historic mission, which was to produce either beauty or truth. Beauty he replaced with experiment. Experiment had characterised American arts and sciences since the 18th century, not least of all Cage's great predecessor, the composer Charles Ives. Truth he replaced with paradox, something Cage learned from Zen Buddhism, but also from a mainstream American philosophical tradition that had passed down from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Fluxus did something similar. It replaced truth with teasing paradox and humour, much of which you will find well represented in the artworks on the walls tonight. It replaced beauty not only with experiment, but also with the spirit of the everyday. You might say it replaced art with aesthetics. This was the notion that artistic forms and techniques belong in and amongst the everyday. Much like, say, the attitude of the American Shakers and their exquisite furniture. The divine, the beautiful and the true belonged in and amongst everyday artefacts, in our packaging, in our wrapping, our posters and our boxes. What happened to capital A art is that it turned into IKEA. Don't laugh, because what happened was actually quite amazing. Art began in a very practical way to move out of galleries, places like this, into the world of industries, homes and cities. While the last 40 years of capital A art has been very ordinary, to say the least, and if I wasn't in such polite company this evening, I would say something much more colourful in that respect. The everyday world of homes and cities has been aestheticised in a way inconceivable to any previous century. That is where the real action has been. And Fluxus pointed in that direction. It said, use simple materials like the ones Ken has used in tonight's exhibition. It said, leave the gallery system. Don't be concerned about art markets. Don't be afraid to get a regular job. Don't rely on grants. Do it for yourself. And that is what the world did. The art inclined did find jobs in business and industry and organisations that thought that design values and thoughtful proportions and simple lines and ingenious patterns, and the one on Ken's tie there, were a good thing. What the world started to grasp was that art and economy had much in common. What hitherto had been set apart was married together in this moment. That art was economics and economics was art was a paradox. But paradoxes, as Emerson and the Zen masters understood, are deeper truths for worlds like our own that struggle greatly with any kind of truth and are the worse for it. We live with shabby relativism and all manner of ridiculous, imperious, post-modern ideologies, and yet somehow we still manage to get along. We do this because for all the inflated nonsense that affects us, we really enjoy and appreciate the solemn nonsense of the serious artist who can instruct us to make a box. On the outside, print the word open. On the inside, print the words shut quick. Ken issued these instructions in 1965. In shut case. These instructions live on, and because I am well known to be a very obedient person, I will follow these instructions and now shut quick. The lid is closing, and as he does so, I invite Ken to come up and give us his view of things. Ken.
That's good. One thing that's really true is a lot of unexpected things have happened to me in my life. And in fact, once again, this remains quite true. I thought Peter said was called the Emu Gallery, and I thought, wow, that's fabulous. Have an exhibition at the Emu Gallery. And now I've learned it's the Emerge Gallery, and what can I say?
You're disappointed, aren't you?
I'm disappointed.
What can we say? we deliver less expectations.
You know, sort of the Emu Gallery in Castleware Hall.
Yeah.
Good things. But other than that, everything that Peter said is reasonably true. As I was listening, I kept thinking about some of these stories. I knew John Cage when I was a young man, and we did a couple of things together. What I always liked were these odd stories that would be floating around that you hear about. One of my favorite John Cage story is that John asked Virgil Parch to go on a trip across country with him. Now, those of you who are musicians, you know who Virgil Parch is. But how many people here know the sort of children's musical piece, Tubby the Tuba?
You guys know everybody knows.
He knows Tubby the Tuba. Anyhow, Virgil composed Tubby the Tuba, and he also composed 4 scenes and 3 acts for Gertrude Stein, but he didn't like traveling. So, you know, he resisted this trip for a long, long time, and finally he said, all right, I'll drive to California with you, but only on one condition. We mustn't stop. Except for gas, we drive, and we keep driving until we get there. And Cage agreed, but all of a sudden, halfway across, not even halfway across, about a third of across the country, Indianapolis, Indiana, and John Cage was hungry. So he said, we gotta stop, we gotta eat something. And in a sort of very abrupt way, Virgil Parch agrees to this. They go into a diner, and they sit down, and they have a sandwich, and then John asks the waitress, what's for dessert? And she looks at him and says to him, well, hon, we've got fabulous peanut butter pie tonight. And Parch looks at this, throws his hands up in the air and shouts, you see, I told you to run out of the diner. Well, this is a little bit like the story of my life. Driving across country, stop for a sandwich, and I get a peanut butter pie instead. I tried to reflect on that for many years, and along the way, I produced, you can say ideas, and you're never sure. You know, you never really know where ideas come from. It's sort of a dialogue and experience. And for some reason, I've thought about these things for a long time. When I met George Machunas, who was the editorial chairman of Fluxus for many years, he said, you have to write these down. And he explained the idea of the event score, which was very much like the music score. You record the idea, someone else can think about it, perform it. If you have a really good memory, you can actually own the entire exhibition, just because you can memorize all the words and ideas and take them away with you. Most of these things exist in 4 versions. There's the idea. Then there's the score, the words on a piece of paper. Then the score itself becomes a kind of an artifact that you can see. So there's an idea, there's a score, then it gets on paper, it's an artifact, then you can actually perform it. And sometimes some of these things will leave traces afterwards if you want to save them for some reason. Now, a lot of museums and collectors do want to save them, but I think the ideas are often really just enough. The horrifying thing to me about the art world and what's happened to it, it's simply beyond belief to me. You know, open up a magazine. Any of you guys seen this astonishingly strange thing of Damien Hirst, this platinum skull encrusted with diamonds and stuff like this? to ask myself, why? Now, it's a sort of a strange and funny idea, but why would anybody spend the kind of money that that thing represents? That I find kind of horrifying and offensive. I think the simplicity, the ideas, and actually, even if it's the Emerge Gallery instead of the View Gallery, to have a frame or a container to come together and just share the ideas. I find this rather pleasing. What I've always enjoyed about the Fluxus work was that my colleagues had so many entertaining ideas that were genuinely worth thinking about. Some for a short time, some for a long time, but always some kind of intelligent pleasure wrapped up in the experience. Back in the 60s and 70s, when I would show things, I would go around and I would always have these people in the audience. It just seemed inevitable. Somebody would inevitably stand up and either make a flippant comment or some sort of belligerent comment. Well, couldn't you do this and this and this and call it art? And I would always try to explain, well, I could, but I don't. On the other hand, you could, and you certainly have the privilege to do so. And I thought this would be really how the world works. Now I'm going to wrap this up with just a couple of short thoughts. I was sort of laughing when Peter mentioned IKEA, because of course I've lived in Sweden and Norway for many, many years, and IKEA is in many respects the idea that the Shakers had. Now I have to admit that in one sense, the Shakers were fabulous craftsmen, and most IKEA stuff is not as beautiful as the Shaker stuff. But it was still the Shaker idea. This was the world's first mail-order furniture house. You could order Shaker chairs in the mail, it would arrive. They also had seats, they had all sorts of wonderful things. And in fact, I've actually talked about that at some length, and about Emerson and the Transcendentalists and the Pragmatists, in an article that I wrote for an exhibition catalog for the Hood Museum of Art. If you go to academia.edu and you look up my page, you will find that particular thing. You can download it for free. The pictures are even in it. I'm trying to think what it's called. Fluxus, and it's called Fluxus, a laboratory of ideas. So you can see that. But the other thing that I was thinking, which really gets back to John Cage's work of March, when we lived in Sweden, in IKEA, you go shopping, and there would also be this kind of food place on your way out. Yep. And I used to have that here too. Yep. But not just the food that you buy when you take it home, but also they had like a hot dog.
Yeah, like the meatballs.
Yeah, and my dog, no, that's the restaurant inside.
Yeah.
It would be like a hot dog stand. And of course, we'd go, we'd take the dog. He couldn't come into the store, but it was like, it's kind of family outing, my wife, dog, myself. And we'd always get him a hot dog. And he thought that this was the real height of living. To be able to go to IKEA on Saturday, do some shopping, or sit in the car while we shop and have a hot dog. And I'm not sure that that's what the Shakers were all about, but I'm certainly willing to say that there's a lot of Fluxus to that. And with that, I will say, please come in, enjoy the exhibition. There's some wine, there's some beer, there's something to eat. Alas, there's no peanut butter pie, but you can always hope for the future.